through the use of standards, codes, and education to the general public, but we do a lot more. The Division of Fire Safety is also, we also operate the State Fire Academy, and we also operate the State USAR team, that's Urban Search and Rescue Team. And we have 90 members of the Urban Search and Rescue Team, and they have deployed to natural disasters all over our country already. And they've been in inception for about 10 years. So when they deploy as a FEMA team. And they are made up of all of our firefighters, first responders, and Division of Fire Safety employees throughout the state. So it's something that we're very proud of. We also have 30 members that make up our state hazmat team that fall under the Division of Fire Safety. So when there's a hazardous materials spill or incident that's greater than the local fire department can handle or manage, we have assets that are available with specialized people and technicians from everything from chemical and biological issues to radioactive or nuclear type issues. We have the tools and staffing available. Back to the primary goal of what the Division of Fire Safety does is, we are an enforcement agency, but we always educate first. So we have a principle of educate, and then enforce. And that's why it's very important for most of our inspectors, if not all of our inspectors, to have some form of education background. Most of our employees actually come from, they're all from a very diverse background, but most are from the fire and emergency services at some point in their lives. And that helps greatly in what we do, especially when we have to explain things to the general public. The Division of Fire Safety handles new construction, existing construction, landlord-tenant complaints. We do not do health issues, but we do handle all residential inspections on buildings termed public buildings. And something that is always a fun thing to try and explain to people is how come in my home I can do anything that I want, but as soon as I rent it out for a day, it becomes a public building. And I always use the analogy of people that rent even for a day have the perception that the building is a safe building that they're renting. And they have a perceived notion that, no undue risk or harm should be brought upon them by renting that property. So in the state of Vermont, the definition of a public building is any building that's rented, even for a day, becomes a public building in this state. We enforce our rules through standards and codes that are nationally recognized. They are adopted in the state of Vermont through a legislative process and rulemaking. So the Division of Fire Safety will promulgate rules, which will incorporate all the codes and standards, and then it actually goes through a legislative process called ICAR and LCAR and becomes law in the state of Vermont. And we typically do that about every 3 years. Because of COVID, we are going to run a 3-year cycle behind. So our next code adoption that would have any changes to the way we do business won't happen until probably the end of this year, 2021. And the last time we adopted new rules and codes and standards was 2015. Vermont historically, believe it or not, we're one of the very few states that our primary cause of fires is not from cooking or electrical. It is actually from heating plants. And it's because, as I'm sure everybody that's on this call knows, we have a very diverse amount of ways to keep our homes warm in the Northeast. We're burning stoves, pellet stoves, inserts into fireplaces, gas and oil-fired furnaces, and electrical are all some of the primary devices. So we do our best to educate the public, and we also mandate inspections on those types of heating appliances on a more frequent basis than the manufacturers of them sometimes require. So in the state of Vermont, we actually write into our rules, they have to be inspected every 2 years, whether the manufacturer says it or not. Most of the manufacturers will tell you you have to do it also. The Division of Fire Safety also has an arson investigation team, and our arson investigation team is made up of currently 7 members of the Division of Fire Safety and 4 members of the Vermont State Police. And they work hand in hand because they both bring different assets to the table. So the state police bring a criminal side and an investigatorial aspect of things to the arson team, and our fire marshals bring building knowledge, fire behavior knowledge to the table. So they work really well hand in hand. And they typically will respond to any any fire call that they're requested to go to with 1 member of each team. So 1 trooper, state trooper, and 1 Division of Fire Safety member will respond. You'll see, if you look down in the bottom of your screen, you'll see Jay Moody, who is one of our field inspectors that's joined us today. And I'm going to use him as an example quite a bit while I have time. So Jay's role is a field inspector in the Division of Fire Safety. And what Jay will do is, as construction projects or existing building renovations are underway, Jay will be the responsible inspector for that, for a geographical area, and he'll go and inspect that project throughout its inception or through its construction process. Jay also would be the field inspector for landlord-tenant disputes or complaints, as they should be called, and any existing residential occupancy that we don't have a history for, we try to inspect, and I'll talk about that briefly in a minute. But the big thing that a lot of people will see Jay for recently is purchase and sale inspections, as we call them at the Division of Fire Safety. And that's because we've had such a large influx of buildings changing hands in the state of Vermont. So a service that we provide is to we'll send an inspector to a property that's going to be sold, and we'll complete an inspection report on that property, and then we'll provide documentation to the owners, current owners, and prospective buyers of that property, so everybody has awareness of what issues the building may have or what should be corrected before a sale happens in some cases. I always make clear that I don't know of any of our inspections that have delayed or stopped the sale of a property at this point. But I guess it could happen if a buyer and a seller couldn't agree on how to address certain issues. The reason that I mentioned residential occupancies is residential occupancies are our highest risk occupancies in the state of Vermont. Unfortunately, or actually fortunately and unfortunately, we don't lose, or people don't succumb to smoke or fire in any type of occupancy other than residential historically in the state of Vermont. Nationally, we fall right in the middle per capita in regards to the amount of carbon monoxide and smoke or fire related deaths per year in the country. And we have had some phenomenal years where we've had 0, which is very difficult to do, but it is an achievement. The residential occupancies get our focus because of it. The matrices show us that there are highest risk occupancies, and we do try and spend as much time with them as we possibly can. To include, if we have to reallocate assets to go from new construction, we will do that, because that's how important existing residential occupancies are. So that's a brief overview of us, our codes, our standards. We're not a big agency. We are only total, even with our administrators, we're only 55 individuals, and we cover the entire state with all of those assets and resources. Most of us wear 3 or 4 hats. So I am right now, I am the regional manager for the Springfield office. I am also the plan reviewer for 2 counties, the Springfield office that the Springfield office covers, and I am on the state urban search and rescue team. I'd like to say you're all getting your money's worth. We definitely work hard, but something that I do love to say is we are a self-funded organization. So we do not take any money from the general fund for the Division of Fire Safety, with exception of the State Fire Academy that gets a small allocation. We are funded through our permits and fees entirely, which is a phenomenal thing for us to be able to tell to our clients. But it also keeps us a very, very small agency. Most of my field inspectors cover an entire county, which is typically 20 to 26 towns by themselves. So they cover a big area and have a lot of responsibility, and it definitely keeps them busy also. Another example is, Jay is on this call with us today. Jay is a field inspector, and he's also on the state hazmat team as a representative for the state. So we all typically pull multiple duties. So with me using about 20 minutes, I will open this up for questions.
Okay, anyone have any questions for Landon? I'm scrolling through, remember, see hands going up.
Last one, Tom.
Go ahead, Paul.
When you're doing the home inspections, what sort of things are you finding? What's the most common findings?
Yeah, so most common things are going to be missing smoke or carbon monoxide detectors, ground fault circuit interrupters for kitchens, bathrooms are very typical. Some of the less typical but still very important are second means of escape, such as windows or doors that lead to the outside from bedrooms. They're less common. Guards and handrails, believe it or not. So in ski areas, nobody likes their view obstructed, right? So one of the biggest battles that one of the biggest educational moments that we have with clients is explaining why on their 30-foot drop deck, they have to have a 42-inch tall guardrail. And one of the best tools that I can do is say, put your hip up against it, and where's your pivot point for where your weight is? It's not at 3 feet, it's well above that. So, we use a lot of visual aids in what we do to try and explain things to people, especially when, excuse me, when it comes to, they're buying that house just for that view. But we do work with them and we do try and find alternatives, but those are absolutely the most common. And I'm going to throw in there up to 8 people sleeping in a dwelling unit. And I'm going to say that as a key term. Living in a ski area, I'm sure you know of them. If you don't, you can walk down Main Street and see them, but there are many properties that sleep or are advertised to sleep, 20, 30, even 40 people. And these buildings just weren't designed to do that in most cases. There are a few, but there's not many. And what it does is it takes a house that was built to be somebody's farmhouse that maybe a few thousand square feet, and it packs people into it that don't know where they are, they don't live there, and they don't have a lot of knowledge on the property. So that adds a lot of additional risk. Those properties are a lot more technical, and we usually end up spending a considerable amount of time trying to make them as safe as possible within reason. And I say that because our codes are actually minimum standards. They're the bare minimum of what the people who write them, which are made up of the industry, builders, engineers, and fire marshals and firefighters, write our codes that we adopt in the state of Vermont. They say, this is the bare minimum that if something happens in this property, it shouldn't cause somebody to lose their life. And that's the way that they're designed. But so that's my caveat is 8 people or fewer. Once you start getting over 8, it gets a little bit more difficult and complex.
So just quick note, I do this, our office does this all the time. So we only do seasonal rentals. Those are the ones that are between mid-November through mid-April. And all of our rentals have to have a change of use permit. So they have to have, and Jay just did one for me the other day. They have to go in, write up a report, and anything that needs to be fixed has to be fixed before we'll allow it to be a rental. And all our rentals that we have, if they're not sprinkled or have the pull stations and things like that, like some of the condos, they are up to eight people. So there's a different threshold. It goes almost commercial after you go over the 8 people. And it is a safety thing. That segues into, and maybe Scott would want to jump in on this one. Ludlow is working on having some rental guidelines and requirements. And I don't know how much pressure that you've had on that, and if it sounds like something that the state's going to run, or if the towns are trying to run it. What's your input on that, Landon?
So far, my input has been an education provider and an information provider to the people from the town of Ludlow that have reached out. I actually did a forum, and I believe it was recorded and replayed on the public access channel for another group. So the state of Vermont, we're already obligated to provide services to the town of Ludlow, and we do that in the form of, just like Jay was there to do inspections. We cannot, I believe, sign a contract to provide any additional services outside of what our statutes already tell us we have to do. So if but what we do have is something called a municipal agreement. And what a municipal agreement is an agreement between the state of Vermont and a local agency that you'll enforce our state statutes, our codes at a local level. And I'm going to say a few towns. Brattleboro has a municipal agreement with this Division of Fire Safety, and they inspect any existing residential occupancies. Hartford, White River Junction, has a municipal agreement with us, and they complete plan review, new construction inspections, and existing residential inspections at a local level with their own inspectors. Where that goes in regards to Ludlow, I'm not sure. But my involvement was to explain the MOU process and what codes and standards we adopt in the state, and to provide questions to any answers that anybody had. To this point, if it moves forward, I would be involved in the, if they move forward with a municipal type agreement with us, I would be involved in regards to who the town hired to do the inspections, that person's individual training, and to make sure that they were at a reasonable level of training before we started an MOU with them. So I haven't heard from them, I can tell you that.
Okay.
So if I can add to that, Kevin.
Okay. Tom, I'll get you after, but Scott, go ahead.
So Landon came and, well, virtually, I believe it was, spoke to the Planning Commission and outlined a lot of things that he's talked about today, and in ways that we could use his Department of Services. And the Planning Commission approached the Select Board about the possibility of various ideas with rentals, and basically the rentals that they were concerned with were like Airbnb and the vacation ones and stuff, the ones that are done online most of the time. So anyways, the Select Board asked them, the Planning Commission, to go back and come on back to them with some other ideas. In the meantime, the Planning Commission approached the village trustees about the same topics, and the trustees said they basically said they really weren't interested. And so right now the ball is in the Planning Commission's court, and we're going to see where that goes, because they were talking about along the lines of having a registry, creating a registry, and there might be fees involved and inspections, and that kind of, I think, scared some people. So anyways, Planning Commission's right now working on things, and probably will approach the Select Board again in the near future. So that's kind of where it's at right now.
Right. Thanks, Scott. Tom, go ahead.
Landon, this is a personal question. I have a rental unit in Ludlow that I rent out. I'm a one-person private person who rents one house that sleeps 8 or less. And I believe it's in good, it's relatively new construction. I believe I followed all the guidelines. But what do you recommend on a proactive basis that someone like myself do?
So I'll say two things. If you're comfortable and confident that the building is newer, and I'm always going to fall back to any owner that asks me this question and say smoke and carbon monoxide detectors. If you maintain them, they're operable, they're in the locations that they should be per the manufacturer's directions, you're a step ahead and you're doing good. Something that's hard, especially as a landlord, that we've learned over the last 15 years is it's hard to maintain a property and if you don't go in it. So, having a reasonable time frame that you revisit your rental property is a very important item, not just for smoke and carbon monoxide detection, but it gives you a better idea of how the property is being maintained, what kind of hazards your tenants have brought into the building, and how they may have altered your building or property to make it less safe over time. So that's one approach. The other approach is if you have an existing building and you're not selling it and it's a rental property, you can always give Jay a call and schedule a walkthrough of the building. And like I said, residential occupancies are always a priority for us. And we try to inspect any new rental property that we've never inspected before when we recognize them. And as the properties go through the purchase and sale process, it gives us an additional opportunity to walk through them and get a documented history that the building was safe by the time that we left. So those are two avenues. Being involved with your property is very important, and not everybody has the same opportunity to do that. But it does help quite a bit.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I don't see a picture from Mary, so shout out, Mary, if you have a question. I just have a icon there for you. Well, I don't see any more questions. Well, thank you very much, Landon and Jay, for joining us. I'm trying to think if I had one more before.
Yeah, and we are probably one of the easiestly reachable state agencies. We actually pick up the phone. If you call our Springfield office, we actually have humans. You don't go to an automated call center. And what we try to do at the division is to always have our regional assistant, some people will call her secretary, but she'd shoot me if I did, and a fire marshal of some sorts here at the office. So, and what that does is give us the ability to answer questions immediately to the best of our ability. And we have remained open throughout all of COVID. And we've staffed our office as minimal as possible, but we have not closed for a single day. So we have remained open and try to keep business as flowing as great as possible. If anybody cares, our phone line is 802-885-8883. It's really an easy phone number. And that gets you to our general phone line, which somebody will answer. It will be a human and get you to who you need to talk to. If anybody ever has any questions or would like to reach out or has specific items they'd like to discuss, they're always welcome to reach out to us, and we'd be happy to assist. I lived in Ludlow for 10 years, and they were a great 10 years. I've never felt like, I'm not that old, but never felt such great community and acceptance as I did when I joined the Ludlow Fire Department and got to work with all the lovely and the families were amazing. And before I leave you all, I'll leave you with a short story. I moved to Ludlow, and I had the military and Raytheon and Boeing had spent a lot of money on my education, and I was a fireman by trade. And I went to the town fire department on a Sunday morning, and I said, hey, here's my credentials and here's who I am and my experience. And I said, can I join? And they said, yeah. And I said, I don't know, I'm about to have a baby and I don't know how much time I'll be able to spend with you guys. Well, they said, your wife's gonna have a baby. And I said, yes, in a few weeks. And they said, well, we need to have a baby shower right away. So I just moved to town, just joined the fire department, and the firefighters and all of their wives got together and threw my wife and daughter and myself a beautiful baby shower just weeks after I had moved here and met everybody. It was very welcoming and it was very warm, and I will always remember those days.
Great story. Thank you for sharing that. Appreciate that. All right, and thanks for coming and speaking with us. And any questions, we'll be sure to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.